North Korea has announced it'll launch a rocket next month, which will put a satellite into orbit. But the US and its allies see the plans as counter to international diplomatic efforts to deal with the reclusive state's nuclear program and are worried the technology could be used to develop long-range missiles in the future. Well, it could also potentially violate UN Security Council resolutions and threatens last month's deal between North Korea and Washington. Under this, Pyongyang was to freeze its uranium weapons program and its long-range missile activities in return for American food aid. Well, Japan has responded by developing its own missile defense system to shoot down any rocket threatening its territory. Well, for more on this, I'm now joined by Executive Editor of Black Agenda Report, Glenn Ford, there in London. The US and its allies, including Japan, have warned North Korea not to go through with this launch because they think it's a pretext for developing long-range missiles. Are they justified in believing this, with Pyongyang actually saying, look, it's only launching a satellite?
Well, yes. I mean, both sides are wrong on this in the sense that if you have the technology to launch a satellite, and this will be North Korea's third attempt at launching a satellite, and it clearly helps you with developing the potential for, if you want, long-range intercontinental ballistic missiles. But at the same time, I mean, South Korea and Japan are both doing exactly the same thing. South Korea attempted to launch a satellite just after the last North Korean attempt, and Japan has put satellites into orbit. So there's a little bit of double standards floating about here.
What about the warnings that this is a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions? If that is the case, could the UN take action if that launch does go ahead?
Well, I mean, clearly the UN could take action, but what it does, I mean, it's got fairly fierce sanctions on North Korea already. North Korea is actually alleviating the risk to Japan because it's shifting this launch from the east coast to the west coast. So it will not fly over Japan in the same way. Whether it flies over Japan's territorial waters is not quite clear. It depends on exactly the direction of launch, but certainly North Korea has attempted to take that into account. I mean, there's a misunderstanding.
Yeah, so on that point then, in effect, is Japan overreacting on this? Is it finding an excuse to be provocative towards North Korea? And also, is it likely that this launch could actually go wrong, as Japan is saying?
Well, I mean, of course, it's possible for the launch to go wrong because the previous two have gone wrong. The first one failed, the third stage failed to ignite, and so it crashed into the sea way past Japan. It seems to me rather unlikely that there's going to be any danger that this is going to hit Japan, in the sense that if it's a three-stage rocket, I mean, it will either have failed before it gets to Japan or it's going to pass over. And as I said, if they're launching due south, and it looks like they're going to do that, having shifted the launch site from the east coast to the west coast, it's very, very unlikely to impose any danger to Japan. But that, of course, depends on the choice of launch direction and launch site to be made by the North Koreans.
So Japan is reacting unnecessarily then?
Well, I mean, put it like this, it's got less danger this time round on the basis of the information we've got than it's had in the past. But part of this problem is a fundamental misunderstanding between the US and North Korea, in the sense that the negotiations, the North Koreans said they will give up their nuclear weapons testing program and they give up their long-range missile testing program. The Americans interpreted this to be saying that they will give up all nuclear activity and all space activity. The North Koreans have taken the view that actually launching a satellite is not developing a long-range intercontinental ballistic missile, and equally that continuing to develop its light water reactor technology is not nuclear testing. I don't know who's wrong, but certainly both sides appeared to think they agreed on rather different things when they made this agreement about 240,000 tons of emergency food aid being given to North Korea in exchange.
Well, that's right, and you raised that point exactly. It seems that diplomatic progress had been made quite recently. Why do you think perhaps we're seeing...
Except that both sides thought they had different agreements. Now, I'm not, without being able to inspect the agreements, we don't know who's got it wrong.
But nevertheless, is there an element, though, of the new North Korean leader perhaps asserting himself after taking over leadership from his father, in the knowledge that perhaps this satellite launch, of course, is going to be a provocation, and yet he's still going to go ahead with it?
Well, yes, and I mean, I think it's very difficult to imagine that they're not going to go ahead now, having announced it so publicly, having made an effort to address the concerns from the past about it appears, about the direction and path and trajectory of the launch. And it is, after all, for the North Koreans, a very important celebration. The 100th anniversary on the 15th of April of the birth of Kim Il-sung.
But Glenn, isn't that food aid just as important to the North Koreans as well, that food aid pledge?
Well, I think it is. Well, no. I mean, let's see what happens. It is clearly important for North Korea. Whether it's just as important is a different issue. And whether, as I said, one would need to look at what the agreement said. But certainly the North Koreans are interpreting this agreement in a rather different way from the United States. And I guess that maybe the United States wants to publish and prove that it's right on this occasion. But I'm still awaiting that publication.
Do you think that lack of understanding and the way this whole agreement's been interpreted will be addressed at the Nuclear Security Summit, which is due to take place in Seoul next week, and perhaps there could be some sort of solution to this tension now?
Well, I mean, I think it needs to be very clear what the two sides agreed, because the United States seems to be implying that North Korea misled it. Now, that will depend on the text of the agreement. So, as I said, let's see the text of the agreement, then we can all agree whether it's North Korea that's misunderstood what's been agreed or the United States.
Just briefly, finally, optimistic for the future concerning relations with North Korea and the rest of the world under this new leadership? Just briefly.
Well, I mean, hopefully this is, if you want, a small diversion on the way to finding some solution. All the evidence is that Kim Jong-un is in control. There's now, if you want, a collective leadership of whom he's the first amongst equals, and that new collective leadership can move forward. We will see that probably more in the summer and autumn rather than now, when, if you want, they're still in the mourning period and about to start the 100th anniversary celebration. This is not a time when you're going to see conciliatory actions taking place.
Glenn, great to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for your time. Glenn Ford there, joining us live there in London. Good to hear from you.